Brilliance Audio presents Dancing with the Sun by Bratt, performed by Christine Williams. It was springtime in upstate South Carolina, an obviously welcome discovery to the little hummingbird that danced with uncontained glee outside Sadie's kitchen window. With its brilliant ruby neck and emerald green head, the contrast it made against the stark grass was mesmerizing. It flitted around, up and down, shifting high and low around the budding rose bushes, inquisitive in its search, fluid in its movements. Unencumbered, free from burdens, it seemed. It peeked in at her, as though asking why the feeder hadn't been filled in months. She wasn't sure why Tom hadn't taken care of it. He was the bird watcher. And she was too tired to deal with it. Or maybe tired wasn't the right word. Her fatigue wasn't of the physical kind. It was that dark fog that slipped in and robbed you of the desire to do anything. It made getting out of bed a major chore in the morning, and getting back into it her most frequent thought during the day. She felt sure that if she'd stuck with her therapist, Lacey, and what kind of name was that for a mental health professional anyway, she would have told her she was having a midlife identity crisis. Sadie thought herself a fairly smart woman, and from the day they'd moved Lauren into the freshman hall and left her standing at the curb waving, she'd known it was a possibility that the empty nest phenomenon could happen to her. Yet she'd successfully navigated through the first year Lauren had been gone, keeping herself busy with more shifts at work and less time at home. Now they were on year 2, and since Sadie had skimmed through year 1 without too much emotional havoc, she'd thought she was good to go. Sighing so hard it sounded like a hurricane breaking the silence, she squirmed on the hard chair and tapped her nails on the table, her eyes straying to the back door that led to the garage, where usually at this time she could hear some sort of puttering going on. But it was quiet. Too quiet. Tom was gone again. Camping. Or at least, that was what he'd said he was doing. But then these days it felt like he always had something to do to take him away from home. On one hand, she would have appreciated an invitation to join him. But on the other hand, he knew her disdain for the outdoors, so why would he even ask? So here she was, sitting in a kitchen so aggressively cleaned it was nearly hospital-like. She stared at her laptop, bored and trying to figure out what to do for the weekend. Without even realizing it, she had narrowed her world, whittled it down into such a small circle there was now no one to call, no one to make plans with. It was out of the question to call her mother, unless she wanted to engage in a conversation that said nothing meaningful as they both harbored unspoken thoughts. And besides, she'd talked to her only a week ago. She thought of Keith, the older brother she'd once idolized, who had left his job as a university professor and was living off the grid with some woman he'd met in an online preppers group. Sadie hadn't talked to him in 2 years, not since he'd tried to convince her that the end of the world was near and she needed to withdraw her savings from the bank and hide it in jars in the yard. She'd asked him if the end of the world was coming, what would she need the money for anyway? Her doubting his prophecies put her smack dab in the enemy zone, she supposed. Sadie had a few friends, but the emotional distance she'd put between her and all of them in the past decade was so vast that it would alarm them if her number popped up on their screens. She thought of her co-workers at Greenville Memorial, where she was an admissions clerk. Marilyn with her 3 boys at home, never having a moment to herself with all the sports and school events they were involved in. That was a woman who surely didn't have time for friends. But even if she did, Sadie couldn't get past the resentment she felt when Marilyn complained about all the things that made boys into boys. Too much laundry, or her going through a mound of groceries each week, or how much unbridled energy they carried. Sadie wanted to tell her to appreciate each tiny thing about them, but she couldn't. Her criticism froze on her tongue every single time. So she avoided Marilyn every chance she could.